All right. Good morning. We are getting going here. Hi, this is Anthony, parent of IRS Medic. Today is August 13th, 2025. And here's a topic I really didn't see coming just a few months ago. It's really something. I'm here. We're going to be talking, we have a U.S. Pope, and in the news is sort of the tax consequences. And so we have a pope who's a U.S. person and now is subject to all of these horrible tax reporting rules and penalties and invasive reporting. And so we are really looking at this as one of the greatest things for our movement to end double taxation for Americans overseas. We got a lot of attention last year when Donald Trump made that explicit campaign promise. We haven't delivered on it yet, but maybe now that the Pope is going to be subject to some of these terrible things like FATCA and FBAR reporting, maybe now somebody will figure out like, hey, this is a bad idea. Joining me today, I'm your host, Anthony Parent. I'm a 20-year tax attorney. I've been doing IRS Medic for a few years now. With me is my long-term returning special guests, Keith Redmond and John Richardson. Keith is with us. Keith runs a group. He runs a Facebook group, Accidental for American Expatriates. Here's a link for it. By the way, Keith, I just sent you someone over. I just sent you someone over to the group. I was up in Vermont last weekend, and I met a gentleman who is from Connecticut. We ended up working at the Middletown Press together at the same time in 1998. Anyway, he told me, he goes, yeah, I'm retiring, and I'm going to move to Spain. And I said, well, yeah, I got to send you.
Okay, good for him.
Yeah. So I sent him over to Keith's group because Keith's group is more about taxation. It's more about, hey, look, the whole lifestyle overseas. So Keith, there you go. I sent you a new. Someone new. I told them all about it. He goes, oh my God, that's exactly what I need. I'm moving overseas, and I kind of need all the support. Where do I go for this? Where do I go for that? Where do I go for that? So, very fascinating. So welcome aboard, Keith. Good morning to you.
Well, sounds good. Sounds good.
Right.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. And along with the great John Richardson, joined. Oh, by the way, that was the formidable Keith Redmond. So I don't want to deny anyone anything. But along joining us this morning.
Don't deny my adjectives.
I will not do that. We're going to have some fun today. And by the way, we always do enjoy a lively discussion, even though I know it takes a few people to start filtering in. We'll get those in. We'll get that going. So let's talk about really kind of the first topic we're going to get to. We have a U.S. Pope. And as a U.S. Pope, he's a U.S. person. He's subject to U.S. taxation worldwide, along with various reporting. Some of those forms we're going to get into. I got to say, we have at least one Catholic and half a Catholic on this podcast. Not sure where John is, but it is a fascinating thing for me as a here's my little here's my little well-used Catholic prayer books, praying for an end to citizenship-based taxation. Well, here it is. We have a pope who's all about it. So now I think this is really the thing is like, well, why is deliverance needed, right? I mean, that's what I want to get into right away. Why is it so friggin' bad if you are trying to be a U.S. person to be in tax compliance? And I think one of the sort of flippant responses is like, well, you just finally hire a tax professional and get it done, right? I mean, you always can hire a tax professional and get it done. Now, Keith, I have a question for you. Any idea what a basic return? So let's just say a tax return for a basic self-employed middle class person is. What would you think?
You mean overseas American?
Yeah, overseas. Yeah. So let's compare something. So someone in the U.S. very identical, husband, wife. A wife has a job, and the husband is self-employed as, say, a plumber. Okay.
Yeah.
What would you think it would cost to do their taxes in the U.S.? If they were going to hire a tax professional, what kind of range would it be talking?
You mean a homeland American who has a basic tax return? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Well, one wife works, and the husband is a self-employed plumber. What would you think that would cost?
Oh boy, that's a good question, Anthony. Because if you ask me what an American overseas with a basic tax return, I might be able to answer that better. But
all right, well, I can let you go in. Hey, look, if you could, I'll tell you the range of what you can be expected to pay. If you're
as a homeland American,
as a homeland American for that return. That return is going to be, you could probably, it's like if you can find the neighbor across, if you could find someone local in your hood who doesn't charge a lot. On the low end, you would be looking at $600. There are guys who will do that low. It's hard to find those people.
was going to maybe say with my parents' family accountant, I think they charged way back when I had to do it, but it was way back when it was about $400. So I guess
Yeah,
600 is pretty good today.
well, yeah, that
You
would
know
be
what I
low.
mean?
So I would say it would be more like 1,000 to 1,200 because you have a self-report, you have that self-employed part in there. That's going to bring it up there. I'd say that's around $1,200. For that return, my firm, we would charge somewhere around. I think it's going to be about just around 1,000, a little over $1,000 to do that
For a basic return. Okay.
for a return with a
Oh,
self-employed.
self-employed. Okay.
Yeah, basic return. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Now, now, Keith,
Yes.
now, Keith, let's
Yes.
take that same return. Imagine someone's overseas. Okay, same return.
Okay.
Now, what we
Self-employed. Self-employed.
self-employed? Yeah,
Oh boy. Let's see. I'm just trying to think of what I did when self-employed overseas. I'm going to say, and mind you, that I'm only dealing with France or whatever with people there. So I would say maybe about 1,500 euro.
yeah,
So that would be, I'm going to say about 1,700, $1,800.
yeah. Probably a little bit more. Probably more like double. So I would say more like 2,000.
About
And there's
$2,000,
about $2,000, and there's some depends. It could go up a lot more.
depending on
Um,
the complications. Okay.
yeah, if the business is doing, there's employees, there's assets, you
Yeah.
might be looking somewhere between two to $3,000 for the middle class family, and it goes from there. So that's what I say. Now let's talk about this too, because this is the fact that is lost. What's the purchasing power of a lot of these places?
What? I didn't hear you say that one more time, Anthony.
The exchange rate in certain countries. That
Oh,
hey,
well, I
look,
mean, right now the dollar's very weak.
right.
So it's really disadvantage. There's a disadvantage for Americans overseas vis-a-vis the exchange rate.
So, and I mean that one of the bigger
Well, wait a minute,
problems.
wait a minute. I'm sorry. It depends. I mean, if somebody's hiring you, Anthony, and they happen to be in France, let's say, it actually works out to their benefit because the
Right now it
dollar's
does.
weak.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Right.
right now it does. But in many countries, the exchange rate isn't great, and
Right.
and I
Like
would
New
say
Zealand, Australia, it's not great.
right. And what
Yeah.
we notice, and what we've noticed over the years is we've talked to thousands of people about compliance, thousands of people around the world, and it's the person more likely to hire us would be from France than say Poland.
Okay.
That we don't get a lot of people in many Eastern European countries, a lot of the countries where the economy isn't as robust to hire us because it takes so much money that oftentimes, and this is really, I
Yeah.
think, the takeaway point that Americans don't understand, homeland Americans don't understand, is that it may be more than 1 month's income
Yeah.
to pay for a tax return to get done.
Very true.
Okay, now that's not the end of the story. That is not the end of the story at all, because John was nice enough, and we'll go over to John's story right now. I got this up on the screen. We're going to get to this because that's not just the cost of this that truly may outstrip 1 month's worth of income, but there is a nightmare of preparation, which John correctly points out, and I think this is something that's also lost. So I'm glad John brought this up today. So this is what we're going to be talking about. We're on John's website, citizenshipsolutions.ca. And here's a blog article that John wrote, and it's really about the trauma of organizing information for your U.S. tax return. Now, John's in Toronto, lovely Toronto. So he wrote this article specific to Canada because of the various technical things, but in many countries there will be analogs, things that are similar. So while this is specific to Canada, as there's many U.S. Canadians, this is also something that also applies generally by analog and extrapolation to other countries. So, good morning, John. You ready to talk about this? You ready? All right. So, so here we go. Here's the prologue, John. Let's talk about it. So, when do we start? When do we start with our preparation for our preparation? We need to prepare for our preparation to prepare our return. So, where do we start?
Yeah. So I think what I've kind of decided over the years is that the way people see, initially at least, filing U.S. tax returns, they just see it as a version of whatever they're used to in their own country, where they just kind of substitute in US stuff. And what people don't realize is that US tax returns are somewhat about taxation directly. But for Americans abroad, they're far more about the extraction, acquisition of information to use down the road. They are just indescribably intrusive, all right? When it comes to Americans generally, but you can see this, I think, more through the lens of Americans abroad. It's kind of like this, right? Report early, report often, report everything, and by God, keep a record of everything you report. Okay, so Americans are reporters, right? They're constantly sort of connecting to the government to give them as much information as possible, right? And most of this comes from, if you look at subtitle F, there's a bunch of reporting requirements, but interestingly, there's a section that's actually titled Persons Subject to Special Provisions. Okay. And the persons subject to special provisions are, anybody who has anything to do with anything that's non-US, foreign, right? And, basically, the US tax code, I think, is premised on, a few basic principles, right? The first is the absolute hatred of anything foreign. Okay. If you see the word foreign, you'll find the word penalty.
We hate you. We hate you. Yeah.
Okay.
That foreign should be interpreted to mean we hate you.
Yeah,
we hate you income. We hate you the most income.
Well, they see it as, because Americans as a culture are 100% under suspicion all the time, right?
Right.
And the only reason that anybody would have a bank account, a financial product, was foreign to the United States. There's only one reason, and that is either for improper tax deferral, okay, or for outright tax evasion. And this would include, and this applies to Americans abroad as well, just sort of by extension. So what we have is this massive amount of information that's required to be filed. Most of it, and I think a lot of the frustration is that people can't even believe why that all this information is required, because they don't understand the purpose of it, right? But let's talk about the purpose for the moment of information returns, really. Okay, so it's very common for Americans abroad to have to file a 5471. If they're a shareholder, if they're a U.S. person shareholder of a controlled foreign corporation. But understand that what this is really about is the United States wanting to find a way to attribute income earned by a corporation, not by the shareholder, but to reach out and find income that's not taxed, that they can't tax directly, and suck it in and force, the shareholder to put that income on their return, right? And we see this in the form of subpart F and guilty and stuff. And this is, of course, as you know, a very, very complicated return. So that's the first, is to find income that somebody else earned and attributed to you. That's what a 5471 actually is. Then we get into, this whole 3520 thing, which is very, very common, which is, it serves a number of purposes. And so it's very, very confusing, right? If you received a gift from a foreign person, that's where you would report it. If you receive distributions from trust, or something like this. And the problem is trust isn't all that well defined. So you've got that problem. There's not even any agreement on the part of the, tax committee on what does or does not constitute trust, right? And then the third you have is the whole PFIC thing, which is absolutely fascinating. And PFICs are completely misunderstood by almost everybody. I'm going to tell you what a PFIC really is, okay? The PFIC regime operates to say to U.S. taxpayers, if you do not include the income from this before you have even received it, then you will pay a special penalty at the point that you do receive it. Okay, that's what
Yeah.
it really is. And 2 out of the 3 ways of reporting PFICs almost guarantee double taxation, almost guarantee double taxation. Because remember that if you are paying tax on income in a PFIC before you've received it, you're paying tax at that point to the US government. But when it's received, then you pay the tax to the other country. And generally speaking, there's no timing alignment for foreign tax credits. So these things need to be understood as the deliberate application of double taxation. Okay, so I mean, the point is that that's what the whole international information regime is really about. Okay,
Wow.
and this
John,
is
John, if I could just, I just want to, interject here, but that I never heard it, explained quite like that, and that's why the great John Richardson is here. So you're absolutely right, though, because and I was sort of thinking this as you were discussing. I was thinking about more versus U.S., and I was thinking, my biggest problem was that there's multiple problems with it, but my problem with it is that the United States government was taxing money that the taxpayer never received. Then then it was like, well, let's look at subpart F, blah, 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 blah. And they're sort of looking at the analogy of subpart F saying, hey, look, well, subpart F is allowed to do this, therefore we can do this, which actually now makes sense. Now that you just explained that, that makes sense. That you're right, because the foreign corporation is not taxed. It's the U.S. shareholder. The U.S. shareholder is taxed on things that aren't its. It
yeah,
is the corporations. So the code is going through and specifically denying corporate formalities around the world because it wants, it needs, it's greedy, it's endless, it's vicious, it's awful. That is actually what's going on. And that, I think, is a great explanation. Why are these forms so terrible? Because the code is trying to do something it actually said it was going to tax income. Now it's taxing things that aren't income. Things that you don't receive aren't income to you. Income to a foreign corporation is not income to you. What comes to you, your distribution, is your income. And that's the crowbar that the IRS uses to say, what's going on behind the scenes there? Because there could be income that's ours that isn't yours. And that's really it is. That's what the IRS, the government says. There's income that's ours that you need to be taxed on that isn't yours.
yeah, that's right. I mean, to some extent, it's just hunting around the world looking for somebody who made a profit that the IRS can't tax directly. So why don't we just attribute it to a U.S. person, right?
And that's what it's all about. And so there's a great explanation why the 5471 is so terrible. Now the 3520, 3520A, the U.S. trusts, they're terrible because it's just we need to collect a lot of information. And again, we still might find some income that.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're terrible. They don't. So most of that doesn't go out and so much create. Well, it depends. Okay, the trust rules, of course. I mean, the whole point of a grantor trust. Okay, by definition, a grantor trust, which is a tax term only, is to prevent somebody from putting assets into a trust and shift the income to somebody else. That's what it is, right? And there are more sort of permutations of that. But the point that I really want to make here is this, okay? That anybody who tells you, there's no tax, it's just an information return.
Yeah.
Obviously would be completely clueless. Now, back to the point of the blog post, right? Was this, over the weekend I was, I described what I was doing, okay, that I was looking at this situation, comparing these returns, etc. And then I look at the difference in what's going on. And, I'm well aware of the difficulty that people have in complying with these U.S. Requirements. And it absolutely is a form of trauma. I mean, can you imagine? I don't know if a resident American could imagine being forced to turn over information about virtually every aspect of your life under threat of penalty coming from a country that you don't live in. I mean, this is incredible stuff. So the point is that and people cannot comply with this. I mean, this is what's so interesting to me, is that there's a subset of people out there. Generally, there's a correlation between age and the inability to do this. partly, because of, older people tend to have more going on and more complexity. But there are a lot of people who simply cannot comply with this. They just cannot understand what's going on. They cannot understand the basic directions and how to get the information. It doesn't matter how it's communicated. So we have a situation where people are being forced to comply with something they can't comply with. All right. And it's huge trauma for people. It really is. Now, I know that there will be people in the United States watching this who think I'm out of my mind. So I want to make it very clear to you that you were absolutely 100% wrong about that, no matter what your imagination is leading you to think at the moment. And I invite you for 1 year to try to live as a tax compliant U.S. citizen outside the country. That is my challenge to you, because this is not, you see, these people imagine that, especially in the academic community, what they think is that, oh, well, it's filling out a 1040 and just putting your foreign income on it. That's what they think this is. It's so misguided and stupid.
Yeah, and I do want to bring up something, because this kind of came up, because I want to just put I want to bring this up on my screen here, because I was going over this yesterday, because I've encountered other situations where you actually cannot verify your tax return. So here's the code. This is section 6065. You have to verify your return. Okay, this is what it says. Except as otherwise provided by the Secretary, any return declaration, statement, or other document required to be made under any provision of the Internal Revenue laws or regulations shall contain or be verified by a written declaration that is made under the penalties of perjury. Here's really the problem. It is true. You actually, it can be impossible to certify to the accuracy of a tax bill. You can get to a range. You can get something that's a range of about here. But often in foreign income, you actually can't get to one precise number, but you are forced to sign on a penalty of law. Now, where I'm also seeing this, and why it came up for me yesterday in my research, was that this is also true for many crypto investors. Many crypto investors are now seeing themselves in the same position as U.S. expats, having an impossible return. That, and essentially it's this, and the problem is this, is that the government in 2014 was in a rush to do something about cryptos. Congress didn't say anything, and the IRS made up these rules to say, hey, crypto is going to be treated like property. Well, cryptos aren't property; they're currency, and taxing something like what it's not results in many, many problems. And the issue is that it's often impossible to truly track bases accurately. You could use a lot of fancy software to infer what your gains are, but when you run the software each time, you may get a different number. So if you run the software with the same data and get a different number, what number do you certify is true on your tax return? So I think that's one big issue that's absolutely true. We are, the thing that I am seeing now is there are people where compliance is now becoming impossible. All they could do is swear to the best of their ability, like that number could be in the range of possible numbers. That's what we actually have going on here. So I just wanted to insert that. But back to your article, John. Thank you for that.
Well,
back to that. Yeah.
So then it just kind of continues through. I continue with my theme that people presumptively think that, so you're filing a U.S. tax return, that it's sort of, the equivalent of a Canadian return or a British return or something. And that is, it's completely wrong, of course. But I go through examples, okay, of important differences that, that make it very, very difficult to, just hand somebody a tax return, hand a U.S. tax return or a Canadian tax return, and expect them, to be able to do it. Because, there's all kinds of obviously differences, in tax systems, right? I go through examples there. People can read the article. But, one of the most common, of course, is where Canada or another country has some kind of tax deferred bank account. And, the U.S. would tax that, right? Or, You don't pay tax on the capital gain of you don't pay capital gains tax on the sale of a principal residence in Canada. In the U.S., you do. The horrible, presumptive treatment of mutual funds. The timing differences, income splitting rules in Canada between spouses, and it goes on and on. And what happens, in my experience as an observer, I'm not a tax preparer, right? To be clear, but I think everybody knows that. But what happens in my experience is that people sort of feed information to a tax preparer, and then all of a sudden you've got a return that has enough problems in it, so it's hard to certify the 5-year compliance to renounce, right? And the problems just continue, sort of year after year after year. When you have omissions in reporting, for example, it is incredibly common, for example, for tax preparers to just equate FBAR and Form 8938, whatever goes on one goes on the other, et cetera. But there's huge differences among these things. And I guess my point is that, if you're going to go to the trouble of filing these U.S. returns, I think you should try to make sure they're done properly, because it's difficult to, reverse engineer this stuff over a number of years, without even more trauma. But really, that's what this is about. It is for a certain personality type, which is not uncommon. I think that from outside the United States, trying to file a U.S. tax return is one of the most traumatic events in their lives.
And it is most, and I think the psychological, and it really, I guess I look at things a little bit differently. I look at the government as intentionally poisoning us with so many things, intentionally poisoning us with poison and bad ideas, and that we're overwhelmed with way too much information, and we're constantly pushed and pushed and pushed and lied to. And in that time, we have, this is where we are. We actually are at a point where, and I think this is something to bring up too, just to understand how devious and diabolical the government is, right? Because you just mentioned it. We have situations, I just mentioned a few, that when you have someone who is an expat return or a crypto return, and that person wants to expatriate, they have to certify the last 5 years of what they've already certified is true, right? They've already certified, oh yeah, are in tax compliance. And you got to wonder, it's like, well, I think I'm in tax compliance. I'm doing the best I can. I can't go to the IRS before I do this to say, hey guys, could you give me a gold star on my compliance?
Right.
But rather, you must self-certify your own compliance to a degree. You can get a tax professional to help you, but ultimately it's you who's certifying your own compliance. And that is kind of, harrowing, right? Because maybe you're fine, maybe you're not. The point is, you're not going to find out for a while, because the government, in its true destructive ability, does everything in order to destroy us. It's not only is it sort of impossible to understand, there's not the staff to administer this. This actually surprises Americans, that if you have a problem with the German taxing authority, something going on, you just email them and they're going to give you an answer back, like, oh yeah, here, just do this. That the tax regimes around the world are not at all as adversarial and as horrible and as punitive and as vicious and as confusing. Not at all, right?
Yeah.
The United States is incredible.
Yeah, in France, you could email, you could even go into the office and meet with someone one-on-one if you have questions. I've done that myself. It's wonderful.
And I would say this, Keith, right now, if you went down to the New Haven office, well, they only take about 5 people a day. They shut down about 12. And the person there would say, yeah, I don't know anything about international taxation. You should really talk to a tax lawyer. That's what they're going to say. It's too complicated. It's too complicated for the IRS help desk. And that's the other thing too, that we have a code that's outside the abilities of the IRS's employees to actually understand what it is. But when you talk to these other regimes around the world, the tax code is at least simple enough that a normal person can go through a training and answer the basic questions. And because all the questions are fairly basic. But we have, it goes on and on and on in the US. It's not even close. If Americans can only see and compare the IRS with every other country's tax administration, then I think they would really understand just how vicious and adversarial. And by the way, when I say adversarial, what I mean is this: the IRS is at war with the American people because the US government is at war with the American people. That is what it is. That is how you have to understand that we are a conquered country. That is the proper way to look at this, that we are a conquered country and we must deal with this foreign government that is out to get us. That is the way to properly look at the US government, because every time that is the best defense you have.
Anthony, I think that what is a fair statement, okay, leaving aside whether it's by accident or design, but what I think is a fair statement is that the Internal Revenue Code has essentially, from a cultural perspective, normalized abuse, okay, because the basic presumption of this, the way there's really been no meaningful tax reform, for since the 50s or maybe even before that, right? But the presumption is that taxpayers have no right to really understand what's required of them, okay? And that it's not clear, it's hit and miss, and, maybe today wasn't your lucky day, sort of thing. But, I do not understand. The more I look at this and think about this tax stuff, right? It clearly is a reflection of the culture of countries. All you need to do to understand a country is look at its tax system. That's it, okay? You don't need to do anything more. And, what you have, at least insofar as the treatment of Americans abroad, is something that is so abusive and so vile that it probably lacks historical precedent,
It does.
Find in the Charles Adams book or something.
No, I don't. I know, and I think in the Charles Adams book, no, the United States of America wins, and and I think that, like, what I can't stand is when people say, "Oh, the tax code is draconian." Draconian would be an improvement. Draconian was an administrator in the Turkish Empire or Ottoman, but it wasn't as bad. Dracos was not as bad as who we have here. Byzantine isn't as bad. No. We are superlative. History books will remember the U.S. tax code as being the worst of all time. Absolutely, no question.
I think that when the history of the United States is written, and I think it may be written very soon. Looking at what's going on, or sooner than we think, anyway. Without a doubt, okay, the tax code and tax administration is going to be part of the description of this, okay?
Yes. I think the first thing, yeah.
It's really incredible. And you can see it, as I've sort of thought for years, all resident Americans need to understand their future is to see how America treats its citizens abroad. That's all that's required, because sooner or later, if you look at the Biden Green Book, and others over the years, I don't think it's confined to the Democrats, although they're particularly good at it. What you will see are proposals that mimic what already applies to Americans abroad in many ways, which is quite interesting. But that is the way it is. It's interesting because, then we bring this to the renunciation, the expatriation issue. By the way, talking about the 5-year certification, I do not believe that is a certification that it's all done correctly, okay? Because that's impossible. I think it's a certification that, you've kind of, made a conscious effort, with appropriate help, do the best you can. That's what I think it means, because it couldn't possibly mean, the way a lot of people interpret this as, 100% correct.
The law doesn't really John, the law says you got to verify these returns, and that you already did verify these returns. I'm not seeing I know I haven't looked at the regulations. I mean,
that's on an individual basis. The language in I think it's 877. That defines what it means to be a covered expatriate. I don't read that 5-year certification as being a certification that everything is done correctly. I just don't read it that way. But it's pretty clear that it needs to be taken seriously if one wants to avoid covered expatriate status, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into some of the problems. Let's get into some of the actual problems here, John, because this is just. I was reading this. It was really. Your writing is very good, and I think it's very expressive of the issue. And actually doing it. So, and I didn't even think about it. You have to start with the organization, right? Before you even do anything, you have to organize. So what's so terrible about the organization process?
Oh my God. So report early, report often, report everything. You can assume that there is no aspect of your financial life that is not subject to reporting on a U.S. return.
Yeah.
Everything. So, you got to read the directions. You have to identify any kind of financial account, anything. I mean, people, need directions on that. Now, this particular post was motivated partly because.
Wow.
The person involved. I mean, clearly.
Wow, right here. That's what I want to highlight right there, John. Right there. That's something.
Yeah, Canadian return was 14 pages. The U.S. was 59 pages.
And this was just a very simple life.
It was totally mindless. It's a retired
Are you kidding?
person.
Oh my God.
It's a retired person with a pension from employment over a number of years, Canada pension plan, old age security, and a brokerage account. That's it. Oh,
and then you found it, and you also found an error. As a non-tax preparer, you found a quick error here. And so not only that,
well, as an expatriation lawyer, I know what these things should be looking at. Okay?
But not only that, but wait a second. I would say then the return, the U.S. return was 59 pages and not quite complete. There are a few more pages to go. We're missing an 8938, weren't we?
No, it was an incomplete 8938 in the sense.
Oh, okay.
Reported, and this is incredibly common. I mean, here's a bit of unsolicited advice for listeners. Your pensions are reportable on Form 8938. I mean, that's a very common omission. But I mean, there were other
financial asset.
What it was a confusion of. What banks have to report under FATCA, right? There are exemptions, for example, certain registered accounts. But the fact that the bank doesn't have to report them to the IRS doesn't mean that they're not financial assets for the purposes of Form 8938, right? So, this is incredibly common to see, all these reporting omissions. And by the way, in this particular case, all the income from the accounts was reported on the actual return, right? It's just that the accounts weren't reported properly, on the Form 8938. So why would that be? Well, I think it's a combination of people can't believe how invasive this is, coupled, with I really don't think that the tax preparation community is very good at explaining, what a U.S. tax return is. And that it's mostly about, handing over information. And frankly, less about the calculation of tax.
And again, and I just want to make this out. He did not own any U.S. taxes. That's always the
no. There's no U.S. tax.
No U.S. tax you do. So it's just all that the U.S. tax code, is a penalty trap. That's all it is. It's a mere penalty trap. We're going to create this imposition of a filing, not because we think you owe us any money, but because we don't want to miss out on our penalty trap, because that's important. That's important for us.
Well, penalties I think that they're taken seriously as a form of revenue raising. I mean, all you have to look at the enforcement of the rules on, reporting foreign gifts, right? They're so crazy. There's that, but there's also, the problem of certification, for expatriation, but there's also the trauma is the biggest issue. So you tell somebody, you say, like, what am I supposed to say to somebody? So you paid, somebody of modest means, they're paying a fortune, to get these returns done, right?
Yeah.
They can hardly afford it, right? I mean, so it's so bad that for most Americans abroad who actually think about it, I mean, when they do their monthly budgeting, they might as well budget a couple $100 for U.S. tax reporting or something, right? I mean,
No, a month's income at least. A month of your income should be allocated to your U.S. tax compliance.
Yeah, or for those who are very conservative, maybe 2 months, right?
Right. Yeah, right. To protect yourself, right?
But I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, this has to come to an end. It is really just a form of abuse that it just inflicts trauma. This is about trauma. And
traumatized people are easier to control, John. That's why I don't think it's unintentional. But anyway, we'll continue.
But trauma is a very, very trauma is a very real aspect of this, right? So here we go. So we identify the information. So we're going to tell you what that is. Then once you've identified the information, now this is interesting. Okay, let me pause here. This is really interesting. Okay, so let's say you identify a Canadian TFSA. All right, so you know that you've got that kind of account. You know you're required to report it. But the next question is, how should it be reported? There are people who take the view that it's a foreign trust, in which case it would be reported on a 3520. There are people who I think take the correct view that it's not a foreign trust because it's not a trust, which means it would just be reported, straight on the Form 8938. So then there's that issue, right? I found it. I have to report it. Report early, report often. It's here, but I don't know how to report it. My God, what do I do? Etc. Then, of course, you get the tax preparer who thinks in terms of penalty avoidance. Well, we better fill out the form.
We better fill it out, right?
Etc. So that's the second problem, right? Then we have actually getting the information on these forms properly, which, can be extremely challenging. I mean, even from a visual point of view. I mean, I don't know if Keith's ever looked at an 8938. I'm sure Anthony has, but I can't even look at the damn things. I mean, they're so visually offensive, and they're so disorganized, right? They're impossible.
Not very artful. No, not very artful. Yeah. No.
And then let's see. And then we have determining whether information must be. Oh, yeah. Here's another one. You ready for this? So when we get to the information returns, right, one of the things that I failed to mention earlier was that some information returns are required to be filed even if a tax return is
That's right.
So, for example, Form 5471, there's a filing requirement even if, for example,
you don't have a filing requirement.
File a tax return. Or incredibly, Form 8621, the PFIC form, unbelievable. There's a requirement to file that form without regard to whether you have to file a tax return. So you got that problem, right? And let's see, then what do we have next? Does your country of residence have rules? And then if that isn't bad enough, then, then I have the following thought. Hey, you think Canada's better? Well, it's better, but it's still bad because Canada's got its own rules for the reporting of foreign income and assets. So you get, they would call these expat Americans living in Canada with a bunch of U.S. stuff. Make no mistake about it, Canada's got its own set of rules. If anybody's listening, think Form T1135. So, I mean, this is a gigantic problem. We haven't even gotten to the step of trying to do a tax return.
Right, we haven't even done that yet. Now, and this is what I'm saying, John. I am really, really troubled right now because for a lot of these things, as we're doing it, look, this is what clients pay us. We have an organizer to go through this to make it as simple for you as possible. Put in this information. We know what to do. Here it is. But again, here's the problem with that. That's going to be 1 to 2 months of income. That's the problem. In order to get something that you can that doesn't traumatize you, it's going to bankrupt you. So the idea that you could self-file a return overseas and not lose your friggin' mind is not quite accurate. That these are the things you need to do. A good tax firm will make this as easy for you as possible to take away this uncertainty, but the cost, and by the way, you still have to do a lot of work. There's still a lot of information you need to upload. I mean, by the way, our clients still prepare a return. I mean, and that's what I mean. And that's what I'm like, they do a lot of the work. They have to do we do a lot of the work too, but there is so much work involved. And again, for the privilege, like you just can't hand it off to us, guys. You have to work with us, with our organizers, to get that information. We'll do it in a way that's not so.
Anthony, that's an incredibly important point. Okay, that there's almost no way. I mean, unless you've really got this well organized,
no way.
To actually hand this off and expect it to be done properly, because it's sort of garbage in, garbage out. Now, the mistakes usually are from the beginning. Okay, the failure to organize information properly, et cetera, et cetera, and I think a failure to decide if you're a first-time filer or you're beginning what for you your U.S. tax filing should look like, right? What are the forms, okay, that you're agreeing you're going to file or not, right? Because there are disagreements on the characterization of certain types of things. I mean, I'll give you an example that I'm thinking about. That I was thinking about last week, and I'm writing a post on this. And I know this flies in the face of the conventional wisdom, but this is what I think after having thought about it. That, in Canada, there's a product called a registered education savings plan. Okay. And what it really is. Now, the problem is that the way it's described in the Income Tax Act of Canada uses the word trust. But we know that from a U.S. point of view, whether something is a trust is determined under the Treasury regulations. We know that the fact that it's called a trust under foreign law or non-U.S. law doesn't make it a trust. Now, so you have to actually look at what these things actually are, right? And not, what they're called. And everybody, has been treating these things as trusts. And I don't think they're trusts at all. Okay. And I don't think TFSAs are trusts. I think these are simply bank accounts, with a tax wrapper. And one simple reason they're not a trust is because there's no change in title to the property, right? I mean, how can it be a trust if the title doesn't go to the trustee? That's fairly basic stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean,
now practically
speaking. Hey, we all have a hard stop at 8:30, so I do want to get to some questions. So we don't have that much time to finish up here. So I just want to make sure.
That's good enough. I have nothing more to say, but
I think that's really the point
for anybody who wants to read it.
So yeah, and I'll put this I'll put the link in the super chat right now to John's article. So if you want to take a look at more of that now, I do want to move on to sort of a proposal, get to some questions quickly, and then we do have a call to action for everyone. So here is basically our sort of the call to action coming from Tax Fairness Abroad. Pope Leo the 14th needs your help. So do the 5 million Americans abroad. Well, I actually would say this helps everybody. This helps every American. It actually helps everybody worldwide. And it does mention Representative Jeff Hurd, who I did reach out to, didn't hear back. He passed the Holy Sovereignty Protection Act. And again, I think the purpose, and I mean, what is it really meant to exclude him, or is it really meant to highlight the problems of citizenship-based taxation? I'm not sure, but I think it highlights the problems of citizenship-based taxation based than anything else. We've gotten more views on some of our videos because we've had Pope Leo. So to me, that says that helps. That helps. So they're going ahead and doing this. And while it helps the post, what about the rest of us? Exactly. So they are going for, now I would just say this, they have Representative Darren LaHood's solution. I'm not saying it's a full solution. I'm not going to get into that exactly, but something does need to happen. I do want to get into that. Now, one thing, John, and really the call to action that we had today was that we are seeking testimonials because people are again saying, what's the big deal? Just pay your taxes. You don't like to pay your taxes. So is that what we're looking for? We're looking for people to share their misery. We've done this before, right?
No, not quite.
No. Okay.
So all roads lead to the Trump pledge, right? To eliminate double taxation. Yeah. That's important. All roads lead to the Trump pledge and renunciation, of course. But so what we're looking for are testimonials that focus on the double taxation issue, right? And that's different from compliance. God knows there's enough of that stuff out there. But we're looking for people who've been hit with transition tax guilty, tax deferred retirement planning accounts, people who've actually experienced double taxation because of these rules. And we would extend that to unjust penalties and to people who have feel they've been forced to renounce U.S. citizenship because of this. This is, again, there are varying people groups, are still at this. Republicans overseas. This is where this request is coming from via my blog.
Well, I also is Solomon still working? Because you have his.
Yeah, is this a new initiative, John? That
yeah, I would say it's a new initiative.
All right. So Solomon is so Solomon has been quiet, but he hasn't been quiet doing nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Okay, and this is important. This is
know.
important to have a testimonials on double taxation, not about compliance.
That's right. And I would ask, if you feel this is appropriate to post in your group, Keith.
Yeah, I will.
That might be a place, to get some of this stuff, right?
Okay.
But they're obviously still working on this, which is good.
So, and again, that
and where would these testimonials go to? Will they go to you?
Basically, I put my email address at the bottom, okay? Because I want to work with people.
I'm sorry, you were breaking up. Say that one more time, John.
So you can send them to me at my email, at my Citizenship Solutions Proton. I want to work with people to improve them, to make sure that they're focused on what they're focused on, which is the double taxation thing. And that's a different thing from I don't like filing a tax return or citizenship taxation unjust. It's more show me the double taxation, right? That's
right.
What this would be.
Right. Okay.
All right. All right. So there's our call to action, and that's actually kind of big news that Solomon is still chugging away.
Well, it's not big news if you know Solomon. Okay.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Very good to know that, and very good to know that he's still, he was the one responsible for getting Donald Trump to make that a campaign promise. Has not been delivered yet, but I think the focus may be on that yet part.
Well, I think it has to be. I mean, the fact that that pledge, whatever, was made live, prime time video. I mean, it's there. And the thing about this is that anybody who's been involved in this knows how hard it is, right?
Yeah, no, right. And there's so many things. I mean, what do we really know? I mean, that's the thing. What do we really know? We're giving story snippets and stories. We're never really there. So that's good to know that Solomon is still that does put a smile on my face. I'm very happy about.
So guys, I have to sign off. I've got a meeting in a minute.
Yeah.
So I'm going to sign off. But I'd be interested to see the end of this and whatever questions there may be. Okay.
Right on. I'll get to some comments. Thank you very much, John. I'm gonna get to some comments right now.
All right, great.
Before I sign off. All right. Thanks, guys.
I'm still here.
Oh, all right. Keith is still
for
here.
A few more minutes.
All right.
Yeah.
We got a few more minutes here. All right. We got his here. Sensei Joe. I did follow you on TikTok. I don't use that app that much, so I get halfway in there. Nice to see you, bud. I guess, I think if the Pope really did, that'd be interesting if the Pope did file an F-bar. So yeah, here's my F-bar. Here you go. Right. That'd be something. I think we'd be going there. Rob B, DC is foreign. Well, I would say it's at least foreign occupied. It is absolutely it is absolutely our top enemy. I mean, I think if Putin invaded, I would welcome them as our liberator. I really would. I'm not sure Keith feels the same way, but Keith is leaving, by the way. Keith just told me he's moving back.
No, not leaving. I'm just going to return to France after taking care of my parents. Yeah,
Keith has been. Yeah, Keith has been the U.S. expat advocate living in America for the past years, but now he's going back to be a U.S.
few years to be a caregiver for mom and dad, and that's been done with. So
yeah. Oh wait. Here we go. Sensei Joe. There's the comment. You didn't see that coming. Solomon Hughes working in the backside. So I do see a lot of his posts are focused on China, but I guess he's still chugging away there. So pretty good, Sensei Joe. I don't think we can count him out yet. And who knows what that one big, beautiful bill was about. That didn't really seem to be I'm not sure what that was about. Let's see what we got here. What Sensei Joe, you live in abroad for 6 years, right? So you know what? And Sensei Joe, this is what I was thinking of. And this is what it was mentioned with John Keith. This is something that happens a lot because of the tax code, the cost of prep. That what will happen is something like, Anthony, your fees are a little bit too high for me to do on a yearly basis. But why don't I have you do my streamlined return so that way I know what my return should look like. Okay, right? Makes sense, Keith? We do that a lot, right? We're like, oh yeah, here, we'll do that. Then what happens, Keith?
What do you mean? What happens?
Well, it's like
they stop
somebody
doing it. Well, they stop
they,
doing it. So you need to really think about the streamlined
yeah,
return,
right. A lot of times we have
it.
people will say, Anthony, I can't get my return done by most. Let me just do 1 year with you, or maybe I'll do a streamlined, and then from that I could be able to do it. But then I think, and now I realize what the problem, because it's that organizational part that kind of comes with our service that you have to figure out when you're self-preparing. So now I'm really seeing why people like, oh yeah, okay, here's my return. I just got to match it up. Oh, next year, right? I think that's what's really happening, Joe. So and Keith. So, all right, here we go. If you call Borchell, good morning to you, bud. If you call the IRS as a regular person these days, they put you on a limitless standby, and then they hang up on you without warning. Well, you can call again. Well, that's called a courtesy disconnect, Borchell. That's what the IRS does. When you're on hold for 2 hours, they gives you a courtesy disconnect so that you can call back and get back into the queue. And that's obviously what our men were fighting for when they stormed the beaches at Normandy. They're like, you know what? We hope our heirs can try to attempt to call their own government to try to figure out what is going on with them. And we want them to be on hold and then have to call back. That's what they want. Now, they do. The IRS will give tax professionals special lines to call that the general public doesn't have, but not all calls. So actually the solution that has been developed, because, hey, man, there is no one as more inventive as the American people. Well, the American people did come up with the solution. There are services. There's called IRS NQ. That's the one that we use so that we don't have to be on hold. And it just costs you money. You could be, and then what, and this is what they do. It's, and I always thought to do this is they have an auto dialer that's always calling the IRS. So they always have calls in hold that will disconnect if no one needs it. But when you use it, it will find you one of those calls that are on hold. You have to pay them. It connects. It's a pretty good service. I should probably promote it. So there's one thing that there's you just say, hey, look, if you as long as you're able to pay a little bit extra scratch, you can get that justice you're entitled to. That's the American way, right? And there, this is a great question here. We got to get to this. I can't get to everyone today. Sorry, guys, but here's a great question. Welcome, Avery. What would happen if you acquire a second citizenship and subsequently cease filing U.S. taxes? Well, that's a huge depends.
Well,
Go
it
ahead,
depends. Yeah, it depends on one's particular profile and situation. Because there's no cookie cutter answer, and no disrespect to the person who asked it. It's a logical question. But it just depends on your particular situation and circumstances.
And one
that
thing
has to be analyzed, and that's what I do.
Yeah, and I think one point to say, Avery, this is what I'll say. If you are thinking that we are saying everybody in the world needs to come in compliance with every little part of the tax code, that's not the point of this. That's not the point of this podcast. The point of this podcast is showing how difficult it is. And yes, people have fine solutions, but it's expensive. And that the law, and essentially the law is mandating, in a way, almost mandating the use of a private professional like myself, which I don't think is quite right. I don't think that's right, that the law is, the law created the tax industry, which is massive. I mean, it is a massive thing that only exists because of the law.
Yeah, and that's why I created a niche for myself where people kind of come to me first to take a look at all their real options. About compliance.
And that's a good, that's a good point. This might be a good point to explain a bit of what Keith does, because there are people, I'm going to tell you this right now. There are people who aren't in tax compliance, have never been in tax compliance, will never be in tax compliance, and they will never have a problem. Okay. Just so you know, but who is that people? And how do you know for sure? Right. Yeah. We don't know for sure, but I will tell you that.
It depends on your profile and situation.
And so that's really one reason why I do suggest to people, hey, before you reach out to a tax professional who really can only give you one thing, comply. I'll tell you, hey, look, you comply. Here's the outcome of this. Here's the outcome of that. That's what a tax professional like me has to do. I can't tell you to do something else. Keith is not a tax professional, but he's more of a navigator, a global navigator, to help people to explain what other people are doing and sort of how they've been able to find solutions. And so you
Yeah,
can reach out to,
and
yeah,
this is based on knowledge and experience over the past 15 years.
of living it, right? And again, and
Yeah,
by the way, and Keith's group is key because when we talk about the trauma is this too, because Keith's group is filled of this people who married a foreign spouse. So you're
yeah.
thinking of this, and that is, I mean, talk about a destructive thing to a relationship, making one of the spouses
Oh,
toxic and making the other spouse have to deal with the toxic, how toxic it is. And it could divide people. It could divide and ruin marriages. And so that's an important thing. And so a lot of what Keith does is kind of marriage family therapy for those for U.S.
yeah.
expats.
We look at different real options and we play out different scenarios.
Yeah, a part of the marriage
Because
family
right,
therapy.
yeah,
Yeah,
because you need to have a strategy moving forward.
absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Ricky. That was a great point to do that. All right, we got a few more comments we have time for. Let's see here. Oh, Andrew Prune. Oh, my buddy Andrew Prune, who basically is responsible for me having no free time anymore, as I'm constantly. He is absolutely responsible for me having no more free time because he keeps on sending me things about the common law and really how the common law interplay between the tax code and the common law. So Andrew is really somebody you should be following on Twitter. He is really part of that whole common law community. And I think this is, and it really ties into like a comment like this. It ties into what Rob is saying, property taxes. And honestly, the common law says property is an absolute right. It's an absolute right. It actually can't be taxed. So there's really significant things that have happened. And essentially, the common law is the actual highest law of the land, that the Constitution protected all of those things. And what has subtly happened, as Andrew and I have been discussing, and not just us, but that the legislative interference is the word I want to bring up, is the phrase I want to work up, that essentially what the tax code is nothing but legislative interference with our fundamental rights that this government actually has no right to do. And worse, the government believes it took away. This government has tried to take our way to check the government because we always have. The people have the right of grand jury. It's not the right of the government. It belongs to the people. The people can indict whoever they want. They can impanel a grand jury against whoever they want. And it's not the government to decide because, of course, the government doesn't want accountability of its own people. Of course, the government wants to decide about who to investigate and who not to, right? The last people they want to investigate is themselves. So that's something that is absolutely going on. So having a lot of fun right there. Let's see here. And courtesy disconnect. Yeah, that's actually what it is. It's a courtesy disconnect, and it happens all the time. We have seen and here's the two things. If you are listening to this, I'm going to give you some of my best free tax advice right now. If you're ready for it. This is free. This is your winner. This is your winner. Okay. If you by any chance took high school Spanish, press 2 for Spanish, because when you call the IRS, all Spanish-speaking calls are routed to the Puerto Rico office. The thing about Puerto Rico, 100% U.S. citizens there. Puerto Rico economy's a little tough. Hard to find white-collar jobs. Hard to find white-collar jobs in Puerto Rico. But one place, IRS. There's a white-collar job. The IRS in Puerto Rico gets the best applicants of any branch in the country by far. They get to pick and choose the best staff. The best run IRS office is actually not in any of the United States, but it's actually in Puerto Rico. So when you press 2 for Spanish, you go to Puerto Rico. They're all bilingual and they're all pretty brilliant. Very nice too, by the way. So there's my tip. Press 2 for Spanish because, and also your hold time will be less. That too. So that's enough fascinating. So speaking English is a detriment when dealing with a tax problem. So it's fascinating, isn't it? And I think this is a great point, Borchell. U.S. taxes are like generative AI. You feed it, Borchell. You don't even know how true you are. This is exactly what this is exactly a tax court case. I am going up and going. This is the problem that we have. You don't find an actual absolute number. You're left with statistical. Hey, look, we believe the income is within this range. We have a 96% probability that the income is within this range. That's what you end up with. You end up with a statistical output. You don't end up with an absolute number. That is so true. And we end up with competing AI. And by the way, the IRS's AI, right, it kind of depends what you put in there, right? Kind of depends on what you put in there. What's the standardized, formula for putting all the relevant information in there? The IRS is out of control, but it's not really something that is entirely their fault because cryptos are a big thing, and Congress has given the IRS nothing to try to figure this out. And and I think the biggest problem and I'm just talking about it in cryptos because, again, in a rush, IRS, without a regulation, a mere notice, said that cryptos are property. Well, I'll tell you this right now, we have Loper Bright in West Virginia versus EPA. A notice isn't even a regulation. So that notice isn't law. But that notice is what the IRS is using to send people to bill and send people to prison and send people to attempt to send people, ruin them like Roger Ver. In 2014, they're like, oh, what's this? You have to calculate basis, but you don't get an absolute number. That is the problem. So people are going to prison for something that can't be quite determined, right? It's amazing. It's amazing. Right, exactly. The Chevron deference, gone. Bye. The IRS is still acting like it's there, though. They're still acting like their notices mean something. They are still there, and they're going to get knocked down. The IRS does. Hey, Barry, how you doing? Good morning to you, Barry. Will there be a big bill 42? I don't know. I don't think so. That big bill seemed a little weird. That big bill seemed like nothing any Republican voted for.
Right.
So I'm not sure, right? I mean, look, that's nothing anyone on the left wanted, and it's not really anything any Republican wanted, but yet we got it. So I'm not really sure about that, Barry. I'm not sure what's going on.
I'm going to have to sign off, Anthony.
All right, yeah, and I think we're going to have to. I'm going to have to head off too. But I want to thank. We always get the great audience. Thank you so much, and I do want to give people. And we already told people how to reach John. If you are thinking of renouncing, Keith, thanks so much for joining us. I'll sign off. I'll take care of it. I'll see you later, Keith. Thanks so much for joining us. Likewise, I will be signing off myself. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us. We have a lot of exciting things going on. And I would just want to say this right here, these comments right here. Borchell, this right here, Borchell, is where it's headed. These are where the argument's going to be. This is where the government is weak. And the people trying to attempt to enforce this, they know it's weak. They feel very like, oh boy, this isn't good. We are making it up, and they know they're making it up. And they're not. These are people who aren't used to making things up, but they are the ones, and the government is very, very nervous about it, that we're actually, the thing that might end the IRS is the IRS, because you end up to things that it gets so complicated you can never quite figure out what's going on. That is where it's going on. So with that, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And by the way, we do the tax prep. So let me just plug my business, my channel. I am Anthony Parent of IRS Medic. We do everything. Where's my link? If you have a tax issue going on, if you have, and we're doing a lot of crypto and tax court litigation. If you have something going on that's not making a lot of sense, if you have a tax bill, a big problem, reach out to me at aparent@irsmedic.com. We enjoy what we're doing here. And likewise first. So therefore, and it is all fiction. Oh my goodness. It really is. It's all fiction that interferes with our fundamental rights. That's where it's going. So it's a funny path I took. I went to law school to be a constitutional lawyer. I wanted to protect due process. I wanted to be one of the good guys, to fight the government, fight for constitutional law. Well, when I graduated law school, I couldn't find a lot of work doing constitutional law. So I became a tax attorney. Now I realize I practice constitutional law, the real law, which has been really a fascinating way. So I want to thank everyone and thank all the community and everyone sharing the information. I think we're really on a path here to get something done because the IRS is weak right now. Its own complications will bury it. And you're at CT, call the office, Rob. Or here, Rob, I'll just email me, Rob. I'll send you my email. Or I'll send you my cell. Just email me, Rob, and we'll hook up. All right. Very good. This is Anthony Parent, IRS Medic. Thanks so much for watching.